Hello and welcome to our viewers joining us from all around the world and to everyone streaming us on CNN Max. I'm Lynda Kinkade. Good to have you with us. Just ahead, Donald Trump falsely claims that Ukraine started the war with Russia after the US holds peace talks with the Kremlin. We'll show you the new video of the moment a Delta Airlines flight crash landed and flipped in Toronto. And the sudden death of a South Korean actress is raising concerns about the pressures faced by celebrities there. We begin with a major shift in relations between the US and Russia. The two countries have agreed to begin restoring diplomatic ties. This following talks in Saudi Arabia, which lasted more than 4 hours. The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says the delegations agreed to work on ending the war in Ukraine. But Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was not invited to that meeting. President Donald Trump says he will probably meet with the Russian president before the end of the month. He also falsely claimed that it was Ukraine who started the war with Russia.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Well, this was Russia's take on how that meeting went.
I think that the meeting was very useful. We didn't just listen to each other, we heard each other. And I think the American side certainly started to understand our side of the argument, which has been many times expounded by President Putin.
Well, meanwhile, President Zelensky was in Ankara meeting with the Turkish president. The Ukrainian leader was scheduled to visit Saudi Arabia later this week, but is now postponing that trip until next month.
You can talk about anything, but no decision can be made without Ukraine on how to end the war in Ukraine. We were not invited to this meeting, the US-Russia meeting in Saudi Arabia. It was a surprise for us, as well as for many. I don't want any coincidences. That's why I'm not going to Saudi Arabia. We contacted our partners in Saudi Arabia. I have very good relations with His Royal Highness Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. We agreed that I will have an official visit on March 10th.
Well, CNN Politics senior reporter Stephen Collinson joins us now for more on all of this. Good to have you with us, Stephen. So Russia essentially brought in from the cold after years of isolation, the US seemingly willing to rebuild relations, reopen embassies. This seems, big picture, like a win for Russia.
It certainly does. Just the fact that the meeting took place after that isolation that you mentioned, ever since the war in Ukraine begun with Russia's invasion, is a win for Russia. And just when Ukraine thought that things couldn't get any worse after not being allowed into that meeting, President Trump spoke this evening. He really did appear to be laying the groundwork for a deal that would ignore all of Ukraine's concerns about the peace and how it could continue to exist as a sovereign democratic nation if the future deal favors Russia. He appeared to be almost getting ready to try to push Zelensky aside by talking about the need for elections in Ukraine before the country gets a seat at the peace table. And by saying that Ukraine started the war, I think the president was doing something which we've seen very often, which is take a false position, repeat it over and over again, and then many people will actually end up believing what he's saying when he fogs the facts. So I think the comments from the president, notwithstanding the fact that Secretary of State Marco Rubio said today that all parties would get a fair resolution to the conflict, has to be even more worrying for Ukraine than the meeting was in itself.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, when we heard from the Ukrainian president, he did say that they won't accept any bilateral negotiations if Ukraine is not at the table, and did add that he was insulted, he was offended that Trump reached out to Putin before reaching out to himself, to Zelensky. Going forward, what can we expect in terms of how Europe might perhaps take the place of the US in its support of Ukraine?
Well, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said he's willing to take part in any future international peace force. The French have indicated that too. That, however, is pending a deal and is also pending, according to Starmer, the need for the US to act as a backstop for any force. Russia said in those talks in Saudi Arabia today that it wouldn't accept any forces in Ukraine from European powers, whether they're under the NATO flag, the EU flag, or any other flag. So that seems to be certainly a sticking point. Zelensky, I guess, has the power of refusing to accept a deal, and he can fight on. But if the United States walks away, if Trump, as he has shown every indication of doing, halts US military and financial aid to Ukraine, that would leave a huge burden on the shoulders of the Europeans. And given their already compromised defense budgets and their delicate fiscal situations, it seems very questionable that they could continue to support Ukraine in a war. So Trump's comments on this are hugely significant, and I think it augurs quite a dark period ahead for Ukraine.
Yeah, certainly. You can see it on President Zelensky's face. Stephen Collinson, good to have you with us from DC. Thank you.
Thanks.